Good evening and welcome. I'm Chris Parnell.
Reporting from Moscow.
Tbilisi.
Times Square.
May your dreams be your only boundaries in life.
Hello and welcome to Living Well. I'm William Kenley. Life can be challenging enough with our hectic schedules, but add in the holidays and your level of stress can get kicked into overload. Donna Tosches, Director for the Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare Employee Assistance Program and the Dennis H. Jones Living Well Network, is here today to help us keep our stress levels in check. Donna, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
So tell us, in addition to working with Methodist Associates, what do you do in working with some of the other companies that you work with?
The Employee Assistance Program provides counseling and workplace help, not just for Methodist, like you said, but for many other businesses in the community. So what people know EAP for most often is providing counseling to employees and their family members, but we also are helpful to the business as well. So we do management consultations, trainings, and we come in and do counseling when there's traumatic incidents in the workplace.
Okay. Well, as I said kind of in the intro, we wanted to talk about additional stresses around the holidays. What are some of the ways that we can cope with those additional stresses?
You know, I think it's a matter of being realistic about what those stressors are and then taking something off of our plate that we have now so that we have more room to do the fun things that we want to do for the holidays. You know, to give you a quick example, I just dropped off a whole bunch of tablecloths at the dry cleaners just to have them dry cleaned and pressed. You know, people can stand there and I could take an hour of my time to iron those, but it's a pain, you know, so I take it to the dry cleaners, they're all ready to go. So what little things can people do that they don't normally do, take off their plate so that they have more time to do holiday stuff?
That seems reasonable. I know every year we talk about simplifying. My wife always says, we're going to simplify the holidays this year. And at the end of the year, I'm not so sure that we simplified. Any tips for that?
Yeah, I think simplification comes with a conversation between everybody in the family. So get everyone in the family together, sit down, and say, okay, what is absolutely a must-have for it to be the holiday season for you? And you know, one person may say it's this cookie, one person may say it's going to this event, one person may say something else. And take all of those things and make that the holiday. But we don't have to make 12 different cookies, visit, you know, 10 different relatives, and go to 5 different functions. So what is the 1 or 2 things that make it the holiday for you, and make that happen?
That makes good sense. Maybe we'll do better this year.
Good, let me know.
I hope so. Work is also a stress driver for us. What are some tips to focus on in helping to reduce our stress related to work?
You know, I think that as much as I love our iPhones and all of that other social media, I think that it's done a disservice to us in work stress because we don't often leave work. We take it with us in the palm of our hand everywhere we go. So I think it's really important to define the hours for work, and then after those hours, unless it's an emergency, you're not at work and you're at the other part of your life. And so that way you have some boundary, a healthy boundary between what you do to earn money and then what you do with the people that you love and care about in your family and your community.
Have you worked with organizations that you, because I think that's a great recommendation, I also think that it involves more than just the individual. It kind of involves the community of people that you work with. Have you worked with organizations that you believe have been able to evolve to that model well?
You know, some people in the organization, but I think that organizations, it's a great point. I think organizations need to come up with a culture that values being out of work. So, you know, to have some high-level people who are not responding to an email at 8 o'clock at night. If it's an emergency, it's a totally different situation. But if somebody sends you an email at 8 o'clock at night and you respond, you're also telling them that you've just given them permission to continue to work long into the night. If that email doesn't need to be immediately responded to, it should wait until you're in work the next day. So it really does come from top down.
That makes sense. I always laugh, and I've been the recipient of this as well as doing it, as calling someone and saying, "I'm calling you to follow up on the text that I just sent you." And but that's kind of the way that we are sometimes on both giving and it coming to us, I think.
You know, it's the multitasking. We think we're so good at multitasking, so it's okay to answer a couple of emails and do something while we're at home. But we're not as good at multitasking as we think that we are.
What are some warning signs that we should look for that maybe we're not doing so well in dealing with life stress?
I think it's behaving in ways that you don't typically behave. If you're a little bit more irritable, if you're having difficulty sleeping, if you're having trouble concentrating. You know, I often use the example that if you've driven home and you've pulled into your parking space at home and you really have no recollection of the drive, then you're not really concentrating so much. You've got a lot on your mind. So I think it's really important to pay attention to those things like sleep, irritability, concentration.
So you're not really there in the present. Can you speak to how stress kind of builds up? I think sometimes we look at stress as an incident, but I know for me personally it seems to be more of a kind of a layering on type of process.
You know, stress is interesting because there can be good stress, right? If you're getting ready for an event or graduation, your child is graduating, but then there can be, like you said, that stress that kind of piles up and then impacts us over a long period of time. And that's the more dangerous kind of stress because we think, okay, I see light at the end of the tunnel, or okay, after this month things are going to get better, but then another project or then something else happens and you don't see it ending. And then that's when it begins to affect our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health. So it's really important to pay attention to when stress just piles on, because eventually something's going to blow.
Makes sense. How about any tips you can give just to maintaining I think your outlook, you know, some folks will hear folks say, do you have problems or do you have opportunities? It depends on how you look at it. Tips to being able to focus how you look at the glass.
Right. This is a great topic because so much of our mental health is about our attitude, right? And if we see something and we see the glass as, you know, half empty or half full, like you said, whether it's a problem or an opportunity, and we really have to train ourselves to think positively. So yes, this day is going to be really busy and I have one stressful thing after another, but what am I going to learn from this day? What can I bring to this day? What can I accomplish in this day? So we really have to train ourselves, and it's a lot like talking to ourselves. You know, when we say, oh my gosh, did that really just happen? Instead, we say, oh wow, look at that. Let me be curious about that. And then we give ourselves an opportunity to be positive rather than be negative.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Up next, winter brings depression for some people. Find out why and what you can do to chase the winter blues away.
You can now watch your favorite Germantown community television shows from anywhere in the world. GHS-TV is streaming online, live 24/7. A viewing screen displays our channel just like you see on television. Simply visit our website at www.ghstv.org. So log on and enjoy hometown news from anywhere in the world, only at ghstv.org.
Every day is so wonderful, and suddenly it's hard to breathe.
Would it be okay if I sat here?
Is she serious? Whatever.
New girl.
Sing away. These words can't bring me down.
Reaching out. Pass it on.
So don't you bring me
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Welcome back. Everyone feels a little down now and then, but what's normal and what's not? We're talking with Donna Tosches, Director for the Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare Employee Assistance Program and the Dennis H. Jones Living Well Network. Donna, how common is it to feel depressed over the holidays?
It's very common to feel down, stressed over the holidays. We have to be careful with what we term depressed, because if somebody feels depressed, they're going to have significant symptoms that are different than if somebody feels a little sad or lonely, or maybe grieving a loss or a loved one who's not here this Christmas. So there's a difference between what we would consider kind of normal sadness over the holidays versus depression over the holidays.
A little bit to add to that, or I guess maybe to ask advice, if you have someone in your family that's kind of that way, that they're missing someone, or you have a loss in your family or a friend, is your advice to kind of let them have their space to grieve, or to try to help them kind of focus on other ways around the holidays? And I wouldn't think you can help people kind of avoid that memory during that time. They have to kind of work through it. I mean, what would you suggest?
Right. I think it's a combination of everything that you just talked about, because you want to honor that person's grief and loss. You want to honor that person's memories of their loved ones. So you want to enter into that with them. So if they want to grieve and mourn, if they just want to sit and watch movies and you want to do that with them, if they just don't want to do anything for a little while and you want to do that with them, that's great. And you can also offer them other opportunities where you can invite them over, you can go out with them shopping, you can tell them you'll sit there and address their greeting cards with them. Basically, you want to be with them. Mm-hmm. Whether that means you're with them in their grief or you're with them in positive times as well.
I see. So kind of let them take the lead. Mm-hmm. That's very helpful advice. What's the difference between feeling a little down and depression, and how do we kind of understand that?
The difference really is the severity of symptoms and the length of time you've been experiencing those symptoms. So some symptoms of depression are difficulty with eating, whether eating too much or not enough, difficulty with sleeping, same thing, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, irritability, anger, loss of concentration, loss of motivation, some hopelessness. So if somebody's feeling like that over the course of a couple of days and then is not feeling like that anymore, it's sadness, or kind of if it comes and goes, it's sadness. But if somebody feels that every day for longer than 2 weeks' time, and it really is impacting their ability to function on a day-to-day basis, that's depression.
Do some people tend to be more at risk for depression than others?
Yes, people who have a past history of depression for themselves or with members of their family, because depression is a genetic disease, and so people can have a predisposition for depression if there's people in their family with depression. And people who suffer with chronic illnesses are more prone to depression.
And I understand, I thought this was interesting, that positive or happy occasions can trigger depression with folks as well. Why is that?
Well, I think that in some ways it's because it increases people's stress level, and then their stress can kind of lead to depression. Sometimes happy moments trigger sadness and further depression because they are missing someone. So it might be a happy occasion where there's a wedding coming up, but there's key members of the family that are no longer with us.
Right.
So then people are depressed. So, you know, even in happiness, we can have sadness, and that's life.
Right. That makes sense. Can you explain seasonal affective disorder?
Seasonal affective disorder is when in winter months, usually, where there's not as much sunlight and there's not as much warmth, where people start to feel symptoms of depression. So because it gets darker earlier, because people are not exposed to that natural sunlight that increases their energy, people can be depressed. So for example, I really think that I suffer from seasonal affective disorder because I'm a much different energy level in when it's lighter later. And what I do is I bought one of those light boxes, they call them, and it just emits a high wattage of light, and you put that on every morning for an hour. So I have it sitting right on my desk in the winter, and I turn it on every morning. It's this like bright light, and it's like giving you that sunlight that you're missing throughout the day, and it really does kind of impact your energy level and your outlook.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, could you accomplish the same thing if you just lived in Florida during the winter months?
Yeah, well, that's a goal.
That's interesting. I do think that's it does happen though. I know, particularly when you get later into the winter and you've experienced it for a long period of time.
Right, and that's really why it's so important to take care of ourselves by eating well and exercising, because people in the winter tend to eat a lot of junk and kind of lay under a blanket and watch TV and not be so active.
I've heard people do that. Thank you very much. Straight ahead, how to manage our expectations and keep everything in perspective. We'll be right back.
Check it out.
When it gets cold, feels like the end. There's no place to go, you know I won't give in. No, I won't give in. Keep holding on, 'cause you know we'll make it through, we'll make it.
Wow. College already.
Yeah. We gotta go.
I love you.
I love you too, Daddy. And thanks for everything.
Gratitude. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Welcome back. Donna Tosches, Director for the Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare Employee Assistance Program and the Dennis H. Jones Living Well Network, has some tips for keeping our expectations realistic. How do we keep realistic expectations for New Year's? I know for me, mine are realistic every year. I'm going to run a couple marathons and lose 25 pounds, and you know, I'm going to get a lot smarter and all those things, and I never do it.
Well, I think if we took those examples, it's because they're not really the definition of realistic. You know, the definition of realistic is achievable, attainable goals. And unless you are daily practicing for a marathon, I don't think that suddenly you're going to be able to run a marathon.
Well, if you want to split hairs, yeah.
So the way to kind of set realistic goals for the new year is to really define what it is that you can achieve and be successful at that over long periods of time. So just set 1 or 2 goals that you want to keep throughout the course of the entire year. Not a laundry list of goals, but 1 or 2 that are really important to you, and then figure out, much like we do in business, where we set quarterly goals, figure out for the first quarter of 2015, what am I accomplishing? For the second quarter, what have I accomplished?
So kind of benchmarks.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So that's, I can see that working pretty well for fitness goals. How about like relationship goals?
So I want to get along better with my spouse goal, right? So you have a discussion with your spouse as to what that's going to look like, and you set up like a mission statement. So for us to get along better and increase our healthy relationship, we're going to have date night every week. And we're going to, write each other a love letter once a week. Some things that you can decide to do together to increase that healthy relationship. So really, with any goal, it's about breaking it down into realistic, achievable chunks. Not, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to have a healthy relationship, or I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to go out running.
Right.
If you've never run before.
Right, right. Probably not going to go well.
Right,
right. How about managing expectations at work?
It's complicated, and not so much different than managing expectations in a family. It has to be a discussion in that department, a discussion between employee and employer. What are the reasonable expectations? In most jobs you have a performance evaluation and you set up some goals, and those goals should be the basis of your expectations at work.
Right.
And if those goals change over time because the expectations of the business needs change, then there needs to be discussion about that. It's all about constant, healthy communication among the people that you work with.
Right. That makes sense, and I know in experience that the frustrations both for the leader or manager as well as a frontline employee or an associate comes from when there's not a clear understanding of what those expectations are.
That's right.
And how you achieve those. Can be a real disappointment from all sides, really. Why do we set unrealistic expectations?
I think it's because we see a bunch of things on TV and on social media that we think is real life. And so if so-and-so can do it, I can do it. If on The Biggest Loser they can lose 20 pounds in a week, I can do it. So I think that we look to external places to define what's healthy and what's not healthy, but what we don't quite get is that they're showing us our best face forward. When we get that Christmas letter from the family that talks about all these fabulous things that happened to them all year, and you're reading that and you're saying, gee, that's not my life. Well, it wasn't really their life either, because they didn't tell you the bad or the ugly, they just told you the good.
Right.
So we kind of benchmark ourselves against people who are only showing us their best foot forward, but not the bad and the ugly.
The brag letter.
You're right.
You think brag letters are a good idea?
I don't know. I take the fifth on that one. only if they include the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting to see them. You talk about the expectations. I was driving in this morning, I was listening to a radio show, and they were talking about some new doll that was being marketed, but they were comparing it to the Barbie, and they said that they had actually done some study that if Barbie was real, Barbie would only have half a liver because her waist is so small she could only have half a liver. And she would actually walk on all fours because her feet were so small that she would not be able to stand up. I thought that was interesting.
But see, we give all of our daughters all of these Barbies for years. So what are we doing? You know, we're setting them up for unrealistic expectations.
Right, that's true. Is there any way to help manage what others expect from us?
I like that healthy communication. See, I think that there's a trifecta of communication. You have to say it, then you have to do it. So you can't just be words, it has to be actions. And then you have to check with the person that they understand what it is that you're doing. So it's the trifecta of communication. You have to say it, you have to do it, and then they have to understand that what you just said to them and what they're seeing. So I think when you do that, you're setting everyone up for expectations that are realistic as opposed to unrealistic.
So kind of doing it, narrating it, and confirming it. That's helpful. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps up our show for today. I hope that living well will help you and your family lead healthy lives. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.